So we're committed to finding opportunities to keeping impacted workers in their current professions to the greatest extent possible. And we recognize that ambitious climate action must be coupled with a commitment for a strong workforce and high-quality job opportunities to support it. Our community, especially our residents in communities of concern, also expressed that they were severely impacted by poor air quality, and they wanted to see significant steps by the city to address this. So to respond to this input, we included a clean air section in the climate action plan dedicated to air quality and bettering the public health of our residents. So looking to go beyond just greenhouse gas reductions, but also focus in on air quality reductions throughout the community. So I'll go through the strategies pretty quickly, and then I'll go on to strategy 4 in a little bit more detail. But first, strategy 1 is our decarbonization of the built environment. This strategy aims to dramatically avoid greenhouse gas reductions from buildings across the city and to improve indoor air quality. The strategy includes 3 measures to address emissions from municipal buildings, existing buildings, and from new development. This accounts for a significant amount of the reductions necessary to achieve that net zero by 2035 goal. Strategy 2 is our access to clean and renewable energy. This maintains that the city has a commitment to 100% renewable energy and acknowledges that the pathway to achieve this target is through San Diego community power. This target remains one of the largest that the city can take to avoid greenhouse gas emissions. Strategy 3 is our mobility and land use strategy. This focuses on greenhouse gas emissions from our transportation sector, which account for over half of all greenhouse gas emissions in San Diego. We've updated our 50% mode shift target. So we previously had a really wonky target that looked at mode shifts specifically in transit priority areas, and now we've expanded that. So basically, 1 out of every 2 trips in the city by 2035 should be taken by walking, bicycling, or public transit. Strategy 4, the one that I will go into in more detail in a minute, is our circular economy and clean community strategy. This maintains a 90% waste diversion target, as well as methane capture from our landfill and wastewater treatment facilities. Then strategy 5 is our resilient infrastructure and ecosystems, which includes targets for the restoration of salt marsh land, for sequestration, and for increasing our local water supply. We're also maintaining our urban tree canopy coverage at a 35% target for 2035, but we are this time prioritizing tree planting efforts in our communities of concern with a commitment to plant 40,000 new trees in our communities of concern by 2030. So while the strategies I just went through are transformational, what we learned is that there will still be residual greenhouse gas emissions, or emissions that will exist after all measures have been implemented. These emissions will need to be addressed to achieve our net zero goal. So through the implementation plan development that we're currently undergoing, we're working on identifying new policies, technological innovations, partnerships, and research that are all necessary components of these emerging climate actions that are beyond our current ability to quantify and assess. So going back to strategy 4. Strategy 4, of course, was always in my heart. So the circular economy and clean community strategy, while it accounts for a relatively small percentage of our greenhouse gas emissions, we have 5 measures that are included in the climate action plan to accelerate our capture of our waste diversion. I would also say that this measure is one of the most visual to our communities. It's one of the most impactful. People might not be working with renewable energy in their day-to-day life, but they are having to work with us to sort their compost and their recycling and to make changes to their daily life in order to help us address this goal. I know these are very text-heavy slides, but I would ask you to just look at the climate action plan as well. We really wanted to focus in on what we heard from our communities that they wanted to see included in the climate action plan as future commitments to helping us reduce waste within San Diego. So our first measure to address this was changes to the waste stream, which includes approving and implementing the polystyrofoam foam and single-use plastics ordinance that the city passed back in 2019, and also moving that through. And then we're also looking for ways that we can expand that in the future. And within the climate action plan, you'll see how we incorporated the core benefits and the different metrics for both feasibility and the potential for equitable impact throughout the plan. So then our second measure within our strategy 4 is about municipal waste reduction. So changes that we need to make to city operations to continue to divert our own waste, including changes to the kind of food that we purchase at the city. This was something massive that we heard from a lot of our stakeholders, that even though we only purchase a little bit of food from the city, it's a little different from the county, they still want to see commitments from us to shift that to a less meat-intensive diet. And then also increasing those procurement targets for compost. Local, as you can see, this is our largest one. So we really heard from the community, and this is something that we wouldn't have heard if we weren't prioritizing that engagement in our communities of concern, that those local food systems and food insecurity and food access was really front of mind for a lot of our communities, especially actually up here or around Linda Vista area. So we included a lot of measures to advance the food system, even though it was more difficult to tie this specifically to greenhouse gas reductions. So you'll see in here a commitment to create a food council or advisory board, create a food waste prevention network, and all around further the food system work within the city of San Diego. Next is our zero waste to landfill. So this really incorporates around adopting and implementing and updating the city's zero waste plan, but also looking further than just recycling or composting even. But how can we create reduce and reuse programs? How can we bring in a deconstruction requirements to the city? What are some of those more forward-thinking actions that we can look at in the future and incorporate? So one of the biggest questions we get asked constantly is that all sounds great, but how are you actually going to do it? So looking at how we're actually going to implement the climate action plan, our staff is currently working on the climate action implementation plan, which should be released, fingers crossed, next week, if everything goes well this week. And that will include detailed steps that the city is going to be taking over the next 5 years to implement all of the measures and actions within the plan. That also includes an implementation cost analysis. So we worked with consultants to look at every single action within the climate action plan and identify what the cost to the city will be over the next 5 years. With that, we're also working with departments to do annual department work plans that for departments to demonstrate how they will be implementing the climate action plan through their upcoming budget requests. So really working toward bringing, including the climate action plan within the whole city governance and prioritizing accountability and transparency for the climate action plan. So like I said, we're hoping to release the full draft of the climate action implementation plan next week by the end of this month. Then likely going to be bringing that in front of the city's environment committee March 9th. All TBD right now, but you should sign up for our mailing list and then you'll see if we made it next week. But of course, we're not waiting for the implementation plan to be done before we get to work. The biggest being the work that our environmental services team has done for organic waste recycling and for bringing that out to the public within the city of San Diego. But at the same time, we're also working to bring a REACH code in front of council that will prevent natural gas from being used in new buildings moving forward. We're also working on our mobility elements. And we're also doing a series of workshops to educate and empower the community through libraries and our communities of concern over the next couple of months. So with that, I may have already gone over my time, so thank you all so much.